Good evening and welcome to Bond-tober. Well, buckle up because we're taking a look at the best James Bond action sequences. The Silhouette Dukeout in Skyfall. This isn't a particularly large action sequence. It's mostly been a slow chase, slow pursuit, around the corners and with shadows and ducking away. But it comes to this incredible moment when the glass breaks and James and the assailant start duking it out in front of a gigantic display. And look at this shot. Roger Deakins was nominated for Best Cinematography at the Academy Awards for this, and I believe that this is one of the shots that's responsible for it. This is one of those shots that is so perfectly composed, the camera movement is perfectly paced, and I immediately got vibes of, this is Maurice Binder. This is the silhouettes from the title sequences of James Bond actually put into the action sequence. So I guess you could say that this choice is a kind of a novelty based on a photographic approach, but I still think it is very cool. And just really proves that Skyfall not only had a good sense of action, but also a terrific photographic style. The Vanquish versus the Jaguar. Die Another Day. Now, for the most part, a lot of the action in Die Another Day is somewhat sullied by the heavy use of CGI. Now, in this sequence, there's a little bit, but it's mostly the talent of some very talented stunt drivers, a lot of aerial photography, and some terrific mechanical effects work. I have such a soft spot for the Aston Martin Vanquish. It was such a cool car to look at, and to see it go into action against a Jaguar, another very cool car, just duking it out on this sheet of ice through icebergs, and you see the car get flipped over at one point, and there's a wonderful callback to Goldfinger when James uses the ejector seat to flip it back up as a missile launches past it. Yeah, I got to give a little bit of credit because that is some great action, and I think that there's just the right balance of practical versus CGI. I think they keep the CGI mostly to a minimum, only to maybe perhaps hide some wires and some other mechanical equipment. But it's a great chase into the ice castle, and we see Zhao meet his dreadful end. I just can't help but love this sequence. Plus, I was over the moon when I saw these two cars at the Peterson Auto Museum 2 years ago. This was just phenomenal. Bike Pursuit from Tomorrow Never Dies. This is a lot of fans have described this scene as kind of a fairly standard action sequence, which I really wouldn't go saying that, largely because of the inventiveness of how the helicopter is used on these very narrow streets in Vietnam. And on top of that, you also have Pierce Brosnan and Michelle Yeoh having some really fun chemistry as they're both shackled. They're still shackled together. And I love the idea that Roger Spottiswoode told Pierce and Michelle separately that they were going to be driving the bike, resulting in this hysterical exchange. I love it. Plus, the stuff that they're able to do on the bike, and Michelle Yeoh gets to show off, kind of in the similar vein of what she used to have to do with Jackie Chan and her other films in Hong Kong cinema. It's just, I find this a really fun sequence. It's perhaps a little bit over the top, particularly the bike sliding under a clearly still and locked in helicopter when it should really be kind of floating around. But it's such a cool moment, and it's great action. It almost reminds me very much of John Woo in that sense. It's very explosive. It's very dynamic, which, I'm sure that Roger Spottiswoode must have taken a page out of his playbook for this, but it's a great sequence, and I always enjoy it. The Tanker Chase from License to Kill. Now, I've already gone on record saying that License to Kill is one of my favorite James Bond movies. I think it was a wonderful change of pace to go in a much darker direction, The villain is interesting. The Bond girl is interesting. Even James's story is very interesting. And it all comes down to this final chase of Sanchez trying to get away with his liquefied cocaine in these Kenworth tanker trucks. And Pam Bouvier has to fly James in to stop them. And there's a lot of great interplay of trying to get these mammoth, slow trucks to get to do all these incredible stunts, and all practical, by the way. There really wasn't a faked shot in any of these movies, considering the trucks have to do a lot of swerving, drive over cars, and my favorite moment, James putting the tanker, cab and all, onto one side, and it actually works. This was captured on camera. Brilliant stuntman performing this moment. And, of course, it does lead to a couple of phenomenal explosions accompanied by Michael Caine's amazing version of the Bond theme. I don't care what you say. That's perfect. Parking issues. Tomorrow Never Dies. Tomorrow Never Dies really does have some good action sequences, as we just talked about with the motorcycle chase. However, this one is much better simply because of how inventive it is. You're in a confined space, which, as people like Jackie Chan and other action directors have noticed, is sometimes more interesting to try to photograph and capture on film than if you are in a wide space. And this is a parking garage, a very full, busy parking garage. And as we've seen, the BMW has a lot of tricks up its sleeve, and James has to, in a very interesting twist, drive it from the back seat with a little remote control. And he tries using all these things, and he's stoppered by closed doors, people blocking the down ramp, and, you could just see the joy in Brosnan's face while executing some of these stunts, particularly this shot. It's just that you could tell Pierce is having a blast doing this. And, I gave a lot of grief to the car in the review of Tomorrow Never Dies, which simply for the reason that I don't hate the car necessarily. I understand the idea of using kind of a nondescript kind of car, sort of a family touring car rather than a sleek, sexy like Aston Martin, for example. It was an interesting little subversion. It's not one of my favorite cars, but I have some respect for it. It really proved its own in this sequence, and just to end this part of talking about it, the ending of this sequence of technically bringing the car back to the rental office slays me every time I watch it.
Congratulations on a safe journey.
Wet Nelly versus the Stromberg Fleet, The Spy Who Loved Me. This is one of those great sequences of classic Bond films where there's multiple henchmen on his tail, and now he's been given a brand new kind of gadget-laden vehicle. Instead of an Aston Martin, it's a Lotus, which was a really nice choice because Lotus produced a lot of really good cars in the 1970s, and the Esprit was no exception. And we see Bond being pursued by Jaws and his cronies in a sedan. They get foiled. We see a motorcycle with a sidecar, with a rocket-powered sidecar, as a matter of fact. And they're trying to get around this moving van going on this 2-lane blacktop, and it's just really fun and inventive. And as soon as you think it's over, we're given one of the coolest moments in any James Bond movie. Everything from the cinematography to the coordination of the car and the helicopter to Marvin Hamlish's amazing score to even Naomi's little wink to James and his little nod. It's a really fun moment. And of course it comes to an end when James knowingly drives little Wet Nelly off onto the pier and she turns into a submarine, dispatching Naomi in the helicopter. It's just a great chase. It's masterfully staged. Lewis Gilbert, like I said in the review for Spy Who Loved Me, was really fantastic at using... This is a little bit of a contrast between what I was just talking about in Tomorrow Never Dies, is if a director is really good at capturing action and blocking his shots in the wide screen, You can get a really effective action sequence there as well. And Lewis Gilbert was a really good director in directing in the widescreen, the CinemaScope format. And here, I think they really did it effectively. There was also John Glenn and Ernest Day on the second unit helping out with these stunts. It's just a wonderful coordination between all units to give us a really excellent action sequence. Red Grant versus Bond from Russia with Love. Here we go from a lot of vehicles back to a little fight. Now, this was considered to be one of the gold standards of a fight in a movie for many years. And a lot of the credit does have to go to director Terrence Young, being able to choreograph this fight in an extremely confined space. This is far more than Tomorrow Never Dies. You have to fit the big camera in there. You have to have the actors being able to move. They have to land the punches correctly. And this is such a brilliant example of James Bond as a blunt instrument, as described by Ian Fleming himself. He has to outsmart Red Grant after learning the whole plot, and he uses, of course, Q's box of tricks to get him off guard, and it results in a really good fight, and enhanced, I think, some say it rather detracted from it, but enhanced by the smashing of a window, and you hear the train cars rattling over the tracks, you hear the whistle going. I think it really amplified the sense of danger and the sense of tension that you hear that continual clickety-clack. It almost sounds a little bit like a heartbeat between both of these two. And of course it ends spectacularly, and what I love too is a brilliant little character point was no smart-ass remark by James. Once he's finished, he's winded, he's tired, but he does straighten his tie, which is a wonderful little moment from Bond. But I like that there was no quip. He understood, okay, this guy's dispatched, we need to get out of here. So it's a great sequence, and not only did it help build the story, but it helped the protagonist get out of that situation and into the third act of the movie. And I think that that's a very effective way of storytelling and how you can use action to tell story. So, for the wonderful fisticuffs. The tank chase from GoldenEye. Y'all know how I feel about this one. I'm just going to play the clip for a second. That's awesome. And you can't tell me any different. Just the idea of Bond just smashing through the wall with this gigantic tank, chasing Ormov and Natalia in the car, and he's driving through the streets of St. Petersburg, just doing almost donuts. It almost looks like the Fast and Furious movies might have taken a little bit of a note from this sequence. They have a lot of fun with the tank being able to just crash through the walls and crash through the corridors where the cars really can't, or they get stuck in the wake of its destruction. This is really the first time they really went for mayhem in an action sequence. And I think Martin Campbell is really good at creating sustained and energetic mayhem in a lot of his action sequences, and this was no exception. Even the idea of it driving through and carrying a statue on the top, it's a great image, and it's paced exceptionally well. The music was not done by Eric Serra. They brought in a replacement composer. I believe his name was John Altman. And, oh man, he should have been the composer for the rest of the movie, because he really does a great James Bond theme, great chase music. I just get immediately, like, my adrenaline just starts rushing down into my body when I start watching the sequence. It's just, this is pure action, and I'm going to play this one more time. The attack on Piz Gloria, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. All right, now we get to do something a little different. We get to talk about not only what a great action sequence is, but what a masterclass it is in build-up. So we already know that Tracy's been captured by Blofeld, and James is not going to get any help from MI6, so he recruits Tracy's father to bring in 3 helicopters disguised as aid workers, and it's set against a gorgeous dawn sky, reds and pinks, and they're just silhouetted against it, and I love the great character work going on, not only with James and Draco, but also with Tracy, who hears the comm in the room, and she has this wonderful reaction of knowing that that's her father, and that he and possibly James are coming to get her. And she gets Blofeld into a vulnerable position up in the sky room, and they're trading witty barbs, but at the same time, John Barry's Honor Majesty Secret Service theme is slowly building. It's slowly racking up the tension. The sun's starting to come up, and we get this amazing shot of James, of George Lazenby with a machine gun silhouetted against the sun. That's one of my favorite shots in the entire series. That is James Bond to me. And of course, it all kicks off when they start shooting up Piz Gloria, and the helicopters are coming in, and Draco's men are starting to drop out. And we get the classic Bond theme. The last time, in fact, the original recording was used in the motion pictures. Moving forward, they would use new re-recorded versions. It just gives me the chills every time. And even some of the sillier moments, like George sliding on the ice, or when he knocks out one of the guards saying, "Guns make me nervous." You know, I can tolerate that because the build-up has been so good and the execution so far has been top-notch. I love the sequence the first time I saw it. I just thought, oh, this is how you build up tension. This is how you build up tension, and then you execute on top of that. This is a top-tier scene in James Bond for me. I can't go on about it enough, and it's second only for, we'll discuss it when I get to the first choice, but the first choice in this one seemed to alternate for me in different years. This is just happens to be the time I'm recording it for film. So the Piz Gloria attack, to Peter Hunt, to John Glenn, to the stunt coordinators, the cinematographer Michael Reed, you guys just absolutely blasted it from the mountaintop on this one. The parkour chase from Casino Royale. Martin Campbell's back again, and this one was a doozy of an action scene. It's right at the beginning of the picture. Bond has just been given his 00 status, and he and another agent are shadowing, and things immediately go wrong, and James launches into the chase. And the gentleman who James is chasing was actually considered to be one of the fathers of what we know today as parkour. And it was such a novelty at the time that I think that they were inspired more or less to create this sequence, to put it into the front of the picture. And it is just from all aspects absolutely insanely perfect. The cinematography by Phil Mayhew kind of darting in and out, going up and down, going from shaky to close-up to something a little more daring. The coverage of this scene is immaculate. The stunt performing by all involved, including Daniel Craig in some cases, is just great. And I remember in the theater getting nervous watching them fighting on on the big booms of the construction cranes, jumping back and forth between them and jumping onto the roofs. That was so exciting to me. I couldn't contain myself. I was just like a kid. I was about 10 or 11 when this movie came out, but I was just like a little kid again watching James Bond for the first time. And again, it really does start to play with the idea of not only Bond as a blunt instrument, but just how much of a mad dog can James be, especially the way the sequence ends at the embassy. It's just a great showcase for Daniel Craig, who has that kind of youthful energy of James Bond. He has that drive, that fierce sense of devotion to his duty throughout the whole scene, that he gets hit something fierce throughout these shots, but he still gets up and he keeps going. He won't give up until the job is done. And I think the reason why I picked it was not only the physical execution of the scene, but also what it meant for James Bond moving forward. That all these scenes would kind of carry some kind of weight to it. Even if it's not significantly heavy or anything like that, but there would still be something motivating the action sequences, which a lot of the James Bond films don't, but this was certainly a case of... this was certainly a case where the action was motivated by the plot, motivated by character, and vice versa, which is outstanding filmmaking, which is why Casino Royale is my favorite James Bond movie. That will probably never change. That remains to be seen, but we'll see. And so the parkour chase is a gigantic leap of faith into the new era of James Bond, and a very successful one.
Parkour! Michael, parkour! Parkour! Extreme! Parkour! Parkour!
And there you have it. Those are the best James Bond action sequences. Next week for Halloween, we're going to be closing out with the best James Bond henchmen. And they are such a pugnacious little bunch, aren't they? I can't wait to get to it. So, till next time, I'm Jim Crowley. This is Bond-tober.